Hello, welcome everybody to our sixth conversation with mentors. Today, we have three amazing participants, people who build companies, people who wrote books, people who is writing books, but what they have in common is that people is their priority, is their professional priority, and they will let us know why this is their topic, but also how to manage people, how to build people, and how to cultivate culture inside of the organizations. Now, I want to welcome to the show TeLisa, Daughtry. Welcome, TeLisa.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
No, it's great having you. It's a great honor for Brooklyn to Bogota to have this team. Now we want to welcome Dominique Mas.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Hi, no, thank you for accepting the invitation. And now we want to invite Michael Landers.
Hello, hola todos. Hello, everybody. Good to be here. Hi, Rosario. Thanks for having me.
Hola, Michael. Hi, how are you? Well, thank you for being here. I will let you guide the conversation. And I want to remember the time when we met with each of you. And when I go back, no matter who of you, people was a big part of that conversation. Then I'm very happy to have you here. Thank you. This will be a very important conversation for our participants, for our community, and the stage is all yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosario. I guess we should start by introducing ourselves.
Yeah, Dominique, go ahead.
All right. I'll start. So a little bit about who I am, and then a little bit about my personal story. Who I am, Dominique Mas. I am currently the director of coaching for Medley. Medley is an organization that runs small group coaching, and we bring different perspectives to people's lives. The other thing that I do is that I'm an actual coach, and I help high performers to move to create their next big thing, whatever that might be for them. For some of them, it might be creating a company. For some of them, it might be getting into a position of leadership. And the third thing I'm focusing on right now is writing my book, which is all about the process of transition and stepping into a new identity. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, and maybe after that, we can talk a little bit about what brought us here to this point in our story.
Michael,
Awesome.
Would you like to go?
Sure, I'm happy to. That sounds good. My name is Michael Landers, and I'm founder of Culture Crossing, which is a global consulting organization working with companies and startups around the world, really. My experience growing up overseas in Latin America mostly, as well as some parts of Asia, really formed kind of my experience professionally, which is really helping companies and individuals define the type of cultures they want to cultivate, whether it be their individual cultures as leaders, right? Or founders, or people who run companies cultivating the cultures of the companies that they want. So really excited to join Dominique and TeLisa here, understanding this idea of how much people and the importance of people plays in the success of companies. And I'm seeing that again and again, and especially now in this moment, how important that is. So looking forward to the discussion today, and also answering questions from everybody who might be joining us and comments. TeLisa.
Right. So I am really, really excited to be here, and hopefully I'm not on mute. You all can still hear me, right? Okay. Well, my name is TeLisa Daughtry, and I am a serial and social entrepreneur, a diversity, equity, inclusion advocate, and award-winning coach and practice for this. I have been in the space that I occupy for 22 years. And out of those 22 years, it's been really difficult navigating across technology and corporate America in leadership opportunities and even entrepreneurship as a intersectional woman, being a woman of color and woman. So I dived into this space because I wanted to help create more inclusive a more inclusive tech ecosystem where all could learn, live, thrive, and succeed and rise to senior leadership opportunities across technology. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here and have this conversation because I know a lot about building culture and communities and have been doing that for about 14 years, online and offline.
So good.
Amazing. I think Rosario wanted us to talk a little bit about our personal story and how we got to where we are. So maybe Michael, you want to go first this time?
Sure. Yeah. So the personal story is interesting. What brought us to this point? So very often when I tell people what I do, is I say, oh, I'm the founder of Culture Crossing. It's a cross-cultural consultancy. The question I usually get after is like, oh, that's so interesting. What is that? Right? What does that mean? Right? Cross-cultural. And so I usually have to decide what type of story I want to tell them. And I'm like, well, do you want to hear the 5-second story? Or do you want to hear the 30-second story or the 1-minute story? Because I'm sure we all have interesting backgrounds. And depending on who you meet and where you meet them, you might decide what to share. So I'll give the quick version, which is, even though I'm from Boston, my personal story is one of transitions and intercultural experiences and being consistently forced to question how I see the world, right? Moving from majority-minority relationships all throughout my life. So at 3 years old, my family moved to Bogota, Colombia, where Rosario's from. And I grew up there from 3 to 15. Then we moved to Brazil for 2 years. Then we moved to Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic for another year. So I went to 3 high schools in 4 years in 3 different countries. Very interesting experience, very confusing experience. After going to university in the United States, 2 weeks after graduation, I moved to Japan. I lived in Japan for several years, working for a traditional Japanese company, coming back to the US and getting an advanced degree in cross-cultural training and cross-cultural relations, which was basically learning how to help yourself transition from one culture to another and help other people transition from one culture to another. And that's where the consultancy came out of. From there, I moved into doing some leadership and management with companies, and then really honed in on this idea of cultivating the cultures that we seek and bridging the gap between what we intend our cultures to be and what cultures might kind of show up. So like TeLisa, really interested and have passion behind this inclusion and mental models of inclusion and getting people to see the impact that they want to have and they can have. So that's kind of my quick story of where and what brought me to where I am right now. And yeah, so my past basically informed the present, which is leading to the future. Who's next?
I'll just jump right in, I guess. So what brought me to this place that we are is 3 factors, and I'll keep it really, really brief. So, my entire journey as a woman in tech, a Black woman coding in 1998 as a girl. And, I didn't see a lot of people who look like me. So the first thing I would do when I get into environments is I always befriend people and create a culture and create a community. So where I've often felt invisible, I knew that there were other people who felt invisible as well. And then I would befriend them and then make a community. But as much as an introvert, extrovert I am, I was still able to, in addition to gather people, I always like creating communities for these people to belong, because throughout my career, whether as, a student or as an employee or as an entrepreneur, I often went into spaces where I didn't feel that I belonged. I felt that I could add value, but I didn't feel like I belonged. And then, so as I transitioned, throughout my technical career to leadership career and even up to entrepreneurship, I realized that having communities and having companies and institutions that nurture community and support different groups, I believe that can tell you a lot about the longevity of a space that you're going to be in. Because especially now, back to our original question, what brought me here? We're now living in a time, especially in the US, where not a lot of groups of people feel included or that they belong. And, this whole conglomerate of wanting to corporately do better, to be more responsible, to be more respectful and create better outcomes and equitable solutions for in our work environments, in our businesses, in our society. So that's what brought me here as a founder of DEI Dojo and a coach for equity and inclusion. And then as my journey as a founder of FlyTechnista, where I place women and girls into career and leadership opportunities and help organizations not only attract them, but retain them and advance them. And they do this by building inclusive companies, equitable companies, where if women are treated, I believe if women are treated fairly, then everyone else is going to be treated fairly. So that's what brought me here.
Nice.
Love it. Love it. So on my side, also a very international background. So I grew up in France and I moved around way later than Michael did. I started moving when I was 18. I wanted to go to England, learn English, and went by myself, had $200 in my pocket, or maybe it was 200 pounds, I think. And somehow made it work. I found jobs, I supported myself and studied, and I became a teacher. In England, decided to teach French there instead of teaching English in France. After 8 years, realized that it was time to move on. So I moved to Barcelona, also taught there, became a teacher in an international school, and that opened a lot of horizons for me. So from there, I also moved to Asia. I was in Manila, Philippines for 4 years, then in Bali, and then in Hong Kong, teaching in international schools. And there I became a leader in educational, in education, and ended up doing a master's in international educational leadership. And like Michael, learning how to lead across culture, really thinking about all my people, because all my teachers were from lots of different countries and I had to make this team work. I was managing a language department, so everybody was coming from all over the world. And really trying to make that team work. As a part of that master's, the whole module was around coaching. And I remember being fascinated by it and thinking, wow, this is so cool, because just like in education, I'm really working with the individual and I'm working with their own strengths, and I'm able to help each person grow in their own way, really treating them as an individual. And that for me was such a revelation, if you like, for my leadership, and it really advanced my leadership skills. Then I moved to New York about 7 years ago, and I came here as a teacher, as an educator, again, leadership position in a brilliant international school. And 4 years down the line, realized, you know what, this isn't my calling anymore. And I really want to start working with individuals, and I want to start working with adults, and I want to do the work I did in education with teachers. I want to do it in a different setting. And so I actually restarted my life and became a coach and started building my own business and delivering workshops. And this is what brought me to today, is now creating a team for Medley, which is what I did in schools. And I'm really just passionate about bringing people together, nurturing them as a team and as individuals. I really believe that if you care for your people, they will give you everything back. And if you help them grow, and if you make sure that each person is consistently learning, consistently moving forward, it doesn't have to be a promotion, but that they're growing, they will stay with you and they will give back to your company. So that's what brings me here, is this idea of supporting individuals and teams to truly grow and blossom.
That's awesome.
So I'm really excited to be here. We have so much in common, you guys.
This is great. Lots of synergies. I love how you said restarted my life. And it's interesting when we look at this idea of this personal story, right? I was curious to hear both from what you both said, which is it brought this notion of the story that we tell ourselves, right? And also, TeLisa, I think you probably relate to this as well, which is the story other people tell about you. Right. Whether it be woman, person of color, for me, minority growing up in Latin America, the American, whatever it is, the man, there you go. But I'm curious about you guys, what stories did you tell yourself that you actually had to prove were false to succeed and get to where you were?
Well, I guess I'll answer that as, it's oftentimes when you sit on the intersection of intersectionality, you you
Nice.
might not know, you might not absolutely know where there are times when you might feel othered in an organization, but you don't really know why, right? So it's easy when you have like identifiers such as man, straight man, right? But like when you're at the intersection of black or woman, or is it because I'm a woman and black, you don't really
Mm-hmm.
know why
Mm-hmm.
you may be othered or discriminated. So I was always mindful that my personal story is when I came into an organization or came into a role, I often had to do my best for both sides, if that makes sense. So, do my best if I was the first woman that they appointed in this technical role or in this position, or to oversee a product or a rollout or all of these other things. So it's now like I feel the weight of I have to do my best as a woman, and then I also have to do my best as a Black person, right? And
Yeah.
if I'm the first in these spaces. So it just made me think a lot about, our personal stories is why the people matter in the organization, which is back to what you said, Dominique, about, when we invest in our people, they do better for us, right? So people are the heartbeat of the organization. And, that starts with customers. It actually doesn't start with our team. It starts with, you wouldn't have the business or be able to build a product or even to create a solution if you don't have people who need these things. And then if you don't have the right people to help you build a thing for these people, you have nothing. So people matter. That was my story for myself. I felt I mattered in an organization, and I wanted to help other people feel like they mattered. So
That's
Dom?
awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks, TeLisa. I'm gonna piggyback on that and share a little bit of my own story and answer at the same time the question of why people matter. For me, the big hurdle was always who am I? Who am I to do this? I come from a small village in the south of France. It's a small fisherman village. Nobody in my family, went to college. Nobody did anything brilliant in their lives. They're amazing people, and they have a fantastic life that they love, but they've never, they didn't travel, they didn't go live abroad, they didn't do all these things. And so for me, it's always been like, yeah, I've done all these things, and that's the story other people tell. But to me, it's like, who am I? I'm a nobody from a small place in the south of France. And that's a story I've had to overcome in order for me to be able to do what I do today. And I think why it matters, or why people matter in an organization, is that people bring so many stories, so many of their, so many of their beliefs, so much of their understanding of life, their perspective, their perceptions. And I think if we are able to harness that and bring people together within the company, help each other understand those different perspectives, then we can really create something that's solid, because it's bringing together all these different stories. And so why people matter, because they bring all these different life stories, and because they've seen such different things, or they've seen the world in different ways. So whether you're thinking about the team or whether you're thinking about product, you're bringing all these different ways or angles or lenses, ways to look at the world. So I think that's an incredible asset to any company.
Yeah, I think that's on. I would say that, when we look at the question of why do people matter for organizations and companies, I actually think that the great majority of companies and organizations recognize that people matter, because without them, the majority of them don't exist. But it's more, what is it that people do that matter? And so I think in tech companies and other companies as well, but I'm going to go with the tech world. I'm based in Silicon Valley, so a lot of the large tech companies, a lot of startups, as well as companies in different countries. But the reason why what it is that the people do that matter is they created the tech, or they supported the tech, or they forwarded the tech, right? And so that's what matters, that they do their job. And I think that's the model from past companies as well, is you do your job. But what we're seeing now is this raising of consciousness to say, no, it's the whole person that matters. Whether they bring your whole self to work or not, that's debatable, but it's that it's you matter, and together, what we do together and how we connect, and to coaching, how we communicate and how we include and unfortunately exclude, that matters for organizations and companies. And that's where the new level of performance is. When I see high performing teams, it goes way beyond what they do, right? Way beyond that. It's the threads that connect between them. If they listen, and how they disagree, and how they come to conclusions, and how they get curious, and how they get frustrated. So to me, it's like that switch now. And we have very little tolerance, I'm seeing, for toxicity, especially in the US. Like, no more tolerance for people berating, for bullying, for excluding. So if you're building a company right now, or if you're in one, and it's like, this matters. It really does. And there's a direct link to high performance, which I think the three of us can attest to.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I'll add to that if you really do care for your people, if you're building, then inevitably you are going to retain your best talent. If you have no energy, no time for toxicity, then you're building this wonderful space for people to be, where they want to help you grow. And at the end of the day, so much of what happens next with your company depends on the talent that you're bringing in, but depends on the people that you're bringing in, because they're building the tech, right? Because they're doing all the things that you need them to do for the company to work. But that's not the only thing anymore.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because it made me think about, like, to your point, Michael, about, there's no nonsense for toxicity. And then Dominique, at your space of like how we show up right now, like a lot of these opportunities and social responsibility that organizations are now facing and businesses are facing due to our own pandemic, right? So, there are a lot of opportunities that this pandemic is giving, not just people and culture and organizations, but our society. So how we want to shop, how we want to work together, who we want to work with, where we want to work at, right? So, I think it's a really interesting time, for people to seek new opportunities. What do you both think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting time to seek new opportunities, and also to redefine how we want to work, and what organizations we want to be a part of, and what at the minimum is going to be required, right? So I'll tell you a quick story, just working with startups over the years. Initially, like 5, 7, 8, 9 years ago, in the startup scene in Silicon Valley, it was like, okay, but you guys have free food, and do you have micro kitchens with free stuff? Like, that was like, and that became just like, everyone was interested. Who had better food, right?
Right.
And then right, and so that, but now that became just like a given.
It matters.
Yeah, before pandemic, that was just BC before Corona, right? That just became a baseline that you'd have it. But then what started to see in the trends, we would hear, I would talk to HR people, and they would be like, we're seeing all these younger talent come in, and they're saying they get the salary, right? They get some of the food benefits and haircuts and what have you, but they also are starting to ask, what kind of development do you offer me?
Right.
And so they started putting in, like, you sign with us today, join our company, we welcome you to the norms. You get 10 one-on-one executive coaching sessions, whatever level you are. And that started to become like the norm, like, oh, of course I would get that. And I welcome both of your thoughts on that if you're seeing that. But then the next thing now is, oh, it's a baseline that we treat people, and we take a stand as a company, internally or externally, about how we're going to include, right? So inclusion's big, TeLisa, as you see it now. I'm seeing it more and more requests for it. But my feeling is just, it'll end up becoming like, that's the norm, right? We get to that point. But I'm seeing those two things play out. That's the hope.
Yeah,
that's
goal,
the hope.
right?
Like, my goal is to work myself out of a job, and for us all to work ourselves out of this job.
Yes,
like we
won't need
we should get to this space in our life and in society where we just have an inclusive community. And I think that's so important. But Dominique, to your point.
Amen.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Michael. And I think what I'm seeing as well is not that companies are offering just executive coaching to others, but they're also offering opportunities for growth outside of the company. So I have a couple of private clients who their company pays me, but we don't work on their work at all. We work on their personal life. We work on their personal stories. We work on where they're at. So I think there's a real understanding also from a lot of companies. And if currently you are building a company, you want to think about that. How are you going to help your people grow? Michael, you used that word grow. And I think it's really, like you said, looking at the whole person. It isn't just about building the person as an employee, as a great leader, as it's building the whole person. It's really thinking about your employees as in a holistic way. And I think that's happening, and it's wonderful to see. It's wonderful.
It is, and there's the pandemic. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just exactly about to add to that, Dominique, where, specifically with the companies that I work with, the employees and Michael as well, because this totally was a Silicon Valley thing where they offer perks, right? So the perks that were previously offered, people, quickly abandoned. Gen Z, millennials, and even and baby boomers, even, like, they don't care about the beer on tap or the beer pong. They want to know if they have wellness and well-being abilities or sessions or coaching classes or development in that space as well. Because, in 2018, the World Health Organization had upgraded burnout to like an actual disease, right? So with more organizations facing employee burnout and, this being a chronic disease at that, so in an illness, I think they became more mindful that it's not only just important to retain our people with a salary, but to invest in them with their wellness and well-being. And so back to, I don't remember which one of you just said, Dominique, at the beginning, when you invest in employees, that's what makes them stay. Like, literally, if there's zero toxic culture and you're investing in my wellness and my well-being, that's my emotional paycheck. That will make me stay at this organization. That will make me stay at this company, because that salary, there's only so much you can negotiate before you actually realize that it doesn't really add value or invest in you in the way that you desire in life, because we're more than our titles. We're more than our roles. We're more than the salary. We're more than the corner office. And I think we all see that as a lot of people are working from home right now, that, if I'm not happy at home doing this job, then I'm not happy. So I think that's
a good point on what's going on right now in the virtual world, which I think, this idea of being connected at work says that I'm going to feel like I'm part of a community, right? And I think what's happening now in this pandemic, with most people going virtual and remote and working in distributed teams, is we've lost this sense of community. A lot of us have really lost it, and our sense of community has been having to be refashioned or reinvented. But going forward, when we do go back a little bit and there's this hybrid, how do you cultivate that community? And I'd ask, everybody listening, it's been like, if you work for a company right now, do you feel it is that you work with a community? Or do you feel that you're just kind of going in? And there's probably a spectrum, right, of feeling, oh my God, this is totally a community, versus no, I just feel like I just show up and do my job, right? But that sense of community, coaching, inclusivity, that's what creates it. The virtual world kind of sends us into this whole another challenge of how do we do that? And I don't think we've figured it out yet, right? I'm sensing that a lot of people, especially this week in particular and last week, are on the verge of cracking. Right? Fatigue, emotional fatigue, stressed out, overworked, as you mentioned, right? Just like, and to add the lack of community to that, and people do need to be heard. So what I love about coaching is it gives people the opportunity to be heard, or group forums. And that's what it's about. It's about listening to each other. And so if you're building an organization, if you're building a company, are you listening to your people? Are you asking questions and then actually listening to them, right? Because that's kind of where it starts. And to TeLisa's point, then you feel like, hey, I'm growing here. People care about me. And guess what? You've created a community that people value. Harder than it looks, but to me, super important.
Yeah, I'm wondering. Oh, sorry, TeLisa. I think
TeLisa, you're on mute.
say something. You're muted.
Oh, I said that's actually, this is really, really quick to Michael, to your point about, it's important to throw those listeners out there. So the same way you would throw out a listener to see if your customers or your clients want a service or need to add an asset or need to add something to your product, the same way you want to throw listeners out there for your teams and for the communities that you're building. What are you hearing from them versus what you think they're saying? I think it's really important that, there's a difference between listening and hearing. And listening is I'm intentionally with my ears perked, with my mind open, with my heart ready to receive you, listening to the issue so we can have a dialogue and that it's not just a monologue. And I think that's important with building teams. Dialogue, not monologue, not you talking at them, but talking with them, listening to them. I think that's important.
Yeah, thanks, TeLisa. And I guess I was going to ask, and that's a perfect follow-up to that. I was going to ask you both, and I have an example for Medley, but would love to hear what you've seen companies do to intentionally create community, big things or small things that perhaps we can share, tips or ideas for people who are building teams to do that. And I'll share.
I was happy to jump in right there. So with my team, before this, because when you think of having virtual teams, right? So I've been in tech for 22 years. About 14 of those years were virtual. We were already working in remote teams and telecommuting and things like that. So what I would say that I've noticed with another team that I actually integrated with my own team was, we have these virtual coffee meets and connects. So, and then also icebreakers such as categories, like we do things like that. And it goes back to you have to find something in your house that's something that I said, but you can't say what it is. And it's assuming that even how we're different, there's always going to be similar things that we all will have in our house, right? So that then threads us back together. And I think that's really cool and really fun. So, Michael.
I love it. Yeah, no, I think so I think there's, in my experience, there's like two levels. There's what you just shared, which is totally true, which is a supplement or substitute for water cooler, walk around office that we lose. And so I love those, hat days categories, invite you into my house. Let's take a look, share. I love it. It builds intimacy. It builds connection. I believe that's important. But then on the other level, Dominique, I looked at, and this, I'm going to build on what TeLisa just said, which is the word threads, right? I think one of the ways to build true community is to build threads and connections between people. And so in person, we have a lot more opportunity for that to happen. We have shared experiences, shared meetings, and how did that go, and going to and from, and maybe you went to a conference with somebody, or you had a road trip with somebody to an office, like, oh, I didn't know that about her, and I went and we had the best time and I learned so much, and blah, blah, blah. That created threads for future, especially cross-functionally, leadership programs, all that. So how do we do that virtually, and creating the space, in my experience, for people to share and really not talk about let's get work done. And it doesn't have to be like, what do you think about this? It's just more like, what's going on with you? Can we create these spaces for people to share? And to TeLisa's point, listen to them. I'm seeing that grow tremendously in this time, whether it's a webinar where you bring a speaker in and they talk and they just share and comments flow, just about something like we've lost transitions in our lives, like just getting people to open up that, or contact
how they're feeling,
executive teams, managerial teams, group teams, what have you, to just say, how's it going, right? Let's talk in some facilitated conversations where people are listening to each other, can be professionally intimate. That to me is where it's starting to grow a bit of community. And to TeLisa's, your point as well, which is, you want to know how to build community? It's pretty simple. Just ask people and listen, and then you'll be able to take it to that next level. But you got to start there and really listen, right? Not just hear them, but listen. So Dominique, what have you found?
Yeah, I love what you said, Michael. I'll go back to it in a second. What we've done at Medley, we're still a very small team. And so very much like TeLisa, we have a morning stand-up every single day, and every day a different member of the team leads. And sometimes we do the New York Times Monday crossword. So it's quick and everyone just shouts out, whatever comes through. But the other thing that we do and that I really love is just questions. What was your favorite trip ever? share your screen, share a picture that's really meaningful to you, and tell us why it's meaningful. So it, like you said, it really replaces the idea of the water cooler conversation and getting to know people. And what I loved, Michael, in what you said is that you brought up the idea of facilitated conversation. And I think that's a really, really important point, that we can't just expect that people are going to get out there and talk and share. But if we, as leaders, bring that opportunity and create a safe space, create the time for people, it just makes it much more accessible and much more likely that people will participate. So if you are building a team, if you are building a company, don't shy away from bringing in external guests who will be able to facilitate the conversation, whether it's through them delivering a workshop or simply doing some group coaching for your team or team coaching. But don't shy away from it. Bring in professionals, bring in people who know how to do these things.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm not here to sell either of us. We're like 3 professionals, you need help, we'll come and sort of it. But the point is you can access people in COVID times so much easier than you would be at very interesting prices, from zero sometimes, people volunteering their time 100% to discounted rates. But the bottom line is, whether it's an internal and external, what I would say is that facilitator has the ability to hold that space, and let people feel safe and comfortable to share and say, what needs your attention today? Something as simple as that, and have some conversation around that. And you would be surprised possibly about how much comes out when the space is held right. To TeLisa's point, people are just going to be like, what, this. But if you force it, it'll feel like a forced community thing. So TeLisa, what do you?
You can't force community. You cannot. So, there again, and oftentimes, do I believe that people want to be not inclusive? No. Or do they want to have toxic work environments? No. What I believe happens is that either we only focus on the profit and then not the people. And then if we don't focus on the people, we don't focus on the problems that the people might be facing, right? So, you can't force culture. Like, culture is everyone's responsibility. So from leadership to entry level, when we join an organization as an employee, you should feel that I want to add value. And as an employee or an entrepreneur, you should feel that you want to add value to your employees. You want to add to them. They want to add to your organization. But forcing community is like forcing friendship. And so back to my point about, like, do people want to build toxic or hostile environments? No, what happens is there's not a shared definition of language that we can feel comfortable or confident to communicate with each other. And when that happens, that's literally how wars are birthed, right? When people lose the language of how to communicate, or, a rational, sound way of communicating, wars are birthed, right? So the same thing happens, not wars in our organization, but, emotional wars, advancement wars, equitable wars. All of these things happen when we don't have shared language. So I think the most important thing is, when you're building a community, make sure you have a shared language. And that's not just as far as whatever you speak, but it's like the language of respect that is spoken in an organization, the language of trust, the language of integrity, all of these other things. So I think having those shared definitions and shared language and being able to effectively communicate with each other, that's what helps us to better collaborate with each other. So, and that's what makes better teams and organizations and communities.
Yeah, no, totally.
So.
And I think one of the things that I've seen, curious to hear what you both think, is when a culture is being forced on, right? One sign I have seen is there's company values, right? And sometimes they're clever in their words. Like, there's a couple startups over the years that have, like, our value is GSD, pardon my French, so it's get done, or MSH, make happen, right? And what I found, and there's other ones are just like, accountability, everybody for everybody, whatever they are. I find that when I walk the halls of companies, right, in culture studies or just meeting with folks, and I hear sarcasm fulfilling those things. Well, it's make us happen, right? Remember, one for everybody. That's a forced kind of example of culture being forced onto people not having that shared language. So I'm always interested in those when they're like, yeah, we got our values, we got our culture book, and it's like, yes, good. Let's see if it's playing out, but it's beyond the book. It's how it feels to be on that team, right? That's what the culture is and what comes naturally to people. And I'm always looking at responses, right? If I'm going through an organization, I'm like, so I heard that why is a problem here, right? If I get someone who goes, why is not a problem here, right? There's a chance that they're in like that fear zone of anti-racism, which is like, we don't have that problem. Right? They're denying it versus, that's interesting. Tell me more. Where did you learn? What did you see? Then I'm like, oh, here's a place where people are curious and care about what's going on. Right? So I always look at how people respond to questions or respond to situations to kind of get a bead on part of a company culture. But that forced bit is tough, right? Because we want it to happen. We're intentional, but then it's the culture is unintentional that comes out sometimes.
You was about to say something, Dom?
Yeah. I was thinking about the culture being intentional and how we make sure that we continue to do that in times where we're not walking the corridors, in times where we're all behind a screen and talking to each other in that way. And I think what came to mind as you were talking, Michael, is having those one-to-one conversations, really having the taking the time to understand where people are. And that's not just for an external consultant to do, but for everyone to do. And the key word here, I think that you used, is intentional. That's it.
Right.
There's a comment somebody asked to Dominique. They said, you talked about treating people in a holistic way. They wanted you to talk a little bit more about that. There it is.
Yeah.
How about you? How would it be?
I think we talked about that a little bit earlier. It's really thinking, I think, TeLisa, you really honed in on this idea of bringing mental health benefits to a company, bringing on, well-being ideas and initiatives, and ensuring that we're supporting people in whatever way that is, whether it's through internal or external coaching, whether it's through creating groups where people can have those facilitated conversations we talked about. I was talking to a friend on Friday afternoon. We went for a walk on the beach, and she was saying to me, I'm so happy that we're doing this because it's Friday at 3 p.m. and I feel like I'm skipping school. And I said, well, are you skipping work? And she said, no, 2 weeks ago, my company decided to extend summer Fridays to the whole year because they don't want us to be behind the screen for that long. And so now we have Friday afternoons off, and as long as we get the work done, it's good. And I thought that was brilliant. I think that's a perfect example of a company thinking about how they're going to support their people in a holistic way. It's not just work. TeLisa, what were you going to say?
That is incredible that you use that now. So now I'm going to use the common word of thread to thread my story with that. Like literally an organization that I was coaching and working with, like they were trying to find a way to engage their employees during this difficult time, whether it be through, stress or, so they actually started doing magic tricks with them on Friday. They brought in a professional, like, so I can't think of the name of the company. I mean, that would be promoting it anyway, but it was so great because they brought in a person to teach their employees magic. It had nothing to do with work. It had nothing to do with business. And this is something that the employees could opt into. And 100% of them opted into it in spite of whatever they thought their workload was. They all opted in to do this. And it wasn't something that they had to do together. They could opt to do it individually with their family as a gift to take stresses off from the home environment, or they could do it with their team members. And then there was an option that they can continuously do things like that. So learn how to juggle, learn how to paint, do magic. And I just thought that that was so brilliant because, you know, when we think of wellness and well-being, it doesn't always look the same for everybody. Not every employee needs yoga or mindfulness or meditation. Maybe what they need is magic tricks. Maybe they need to know how to cook to get the frustration out, or maybe they want to learn a painting class because it's something they never had the time to do before a pandemic. So I think that all of these offerings like encompass well-being and should encompass well-being. I think that it's just a brilliant way to engage your employees and really give them some positive morale for the moment.
Yeah.
So
I think that's also, I think when we look at the word holistic, right, it means kind of like the whole, right? Treating the whole person, looking at the whole situation and being acutely aware of all the things that are intricately connected. So typically over the years, going to work would be, we treat your time. These are the hours you work. We talked about the micro kitchens and food. We treat your stomach. Here's food for you, or we'll give you an hour for lunch, right? We give you money, right? And then we might have employee resource groups and some mental wellness things. But what we're adding here is what are the other aspects that is needed? So if you want to build this employee culture or an organization that's holistic, and to TeLisa's point, it's not going to be the same for everybody, but you have variety. And are you, again, asking the questions and listening to hear what it is that people want, right? Founders create companies. They have clear ideas of what kind of culture they think they want to create. But very much that culture is created around those founders. They bring it. And sometimes it's great. Steve Jobs, I mean, there's pros and cons of it. But once you start bringing other people in, right, the culture starts to take a life of its own. People say culture starts at the top, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I don't know if that, I'll tell you this, culture is not one dimension. Culture doesn't really exist, right? It's a human construct, right? But it's the mix of us. We're having a culture, the culture of what it feels like to be on this panel, which is driven by the three of us and the people who are joining us that we can't see right now, right? But we can be mindful of that culture, but how do you not impose that culture yet? This is a question. How do I not impose a culture yet find ways to bring what I believe is important for the culture?
So I think this is a great question, actually, to segue that, Michael, is what are some positive strategies that we can use in our companies to not impose our culture? So to add to that, you know, allow people to add to your culture. The moment that you start to define that or other someone that they don't belong, that's when you deem in your mind that they don't fit, when you really should be looking for add. So culture add versus culture fit. Those are I think that's a really necessary strategy to have. Like, how does this person add to our culture? Because it goes back to like food, right? Food is just food. We put the construct that this is our culture, that this is, no, when you cook with certain ingredients, there might be other people who cook with the same ingredients as you, but ultimately the ingredients together is what makes the culture or the experience, right? Because if I add red pepper to cornbread, like that just might be stuffing. If I add red pepper to a país bread, then that might be a tortilla, right? So like it really just depends on what you took the individual ingredient and made it, and that's what makes the culture, right? So I think we should always, you know, to better build culture and not force culture is allow people to add to the culture, because they might add in a way that you had not previously thought of or defined in your head of what your culture actually looks like. They might add something so much better. If it's toxic, you will know that they're not adding to your culture. They're actually poisoning your culture. So I think it's important when it's something that adds to everyone and they add, then that's a great culture add. But if it's something that takes away from the culture and kills and poisons other people, then that's not the way that you would want people to add.
I like it, Dominique.
Lisa. Yeah, I was just going to add that we talked earlier about personal stories and people bringing their personal stories and perspectives. And I think it's exactly what you talked about, TeLisa, is letting people share those perspectives and welcoming the idea that culture means a lot of different things, and welcoming the idea that we can make it work by listening, and we've gone back to that word a lot today, listening to each other. And the second point I wanted to bring up is also, TeLisa, earlier you talked about the opportunities that the pandemic has given. And one thing that I've seen certainly with my private clients, a lot of people who are currently in big transition, is that the pandemic has given them a lot of time to reflect. And a lot of them have lost their jobs, or some of them are making a conscious decision to change their jobs. And when we try to understand what it is that's driving that change, that pivot, for a lot of them is that they want to have more impact. They want to be more driven by what they can bring to society, to their company, etc. And so I think this is a great opportunity for companies to look at what are people wanting to give in this moment. A lot of people want to give. So what are people wanting to bring, and what are people wanting to give? And I think that will help us to not impose a culture, but again, build from what people are wanting to or how people are wanting to show up in this particular moment.
Yeah, I think that's super meaningful and accurate. One other thing I would just add in terms of positive ways that we can use to not impose the culture is just to think about what aspects of culture, if you're working in an organization right now, or you're a founder of one, or you want to be a founder of one, or in the middle of it, what aspects of culture do people comment on? And here's the thing that I think some leaders maybe get wrong sometimes, which is they try too hard to make a big culture. They try too hard to make big kind of, this is how we're going to be, and this is who we stand for, and this is what we stand for. And the challenge with those is sometimes those stakes in the ground never move. And to TeLisa's point, they never get added to. They can rust and kind of crumble. But here's the thing. When you ask people, what do you like about that restaurant? What do you like about that company? What do you like about being a customer there? They're small things. So when people used to say, hey, Michael, what do you enjoy about Japanese culture? Right? That's a huge question. That's a whole country. 150 million people, hundreds, thousands of years old. And I wouldn't go deep into it. I'd be like, you know what I really love? I love that at the restaurant, every time I sit down at a restaurant, whether it's in the wintertime or the summertime, they give you a towel, either cold or hot, that you open up. It's called an oshibori, and you get to wash your hands before you eat. Small things. I love taking my shoes off before entering. Or people will tell you what they don't like about cultures. I like that restaurant, but I hate that they do this. Right? So I would think about ways that you can positively impact is little small things. Look at airlines. Back when you used to fly, I don't know if you guys flew a lot. I did. I haven't been on an airplane for 7 months. It's been a long time. But if you fly in the United States, there's, most of the airlines were always traditional. You get on, everybody, buckle your seatbelts. And then one of the airlines, Southwest, started to really open it up and let you sit wherever you wanted to sit. And they would tell jokes through the PA, and there was just like small little things that people, I love how they don't do what everybody else does. So when you think about culture, it can be really small things, but people love it and they appreciate it, or the opposite will happen. So that would be something else I would just add to it. If you're looking to find this way to create positive things, not to impose, what do people already love? What do people like to be a part of? Highlight those. And what do they not like? Get rid of those, in addition to what TeLisa was saying about culture adds versus fits, for sure. All right, what's our next question? What do you guys think? All right, Felipe, thank you.
There it is.
And it's there.
The decision has been made for us.
I love that. I love having a guide in life. I wish I could have that all the time. I could just walk down the streets like, what should I do next? Boom, there you go. Okay. All right, TeLisa, who wants this one? Who wants to start?
All right. So how to transform these organizational and cultural values into the value proposition we offer to clients, how to communicate that, and could they be considered as part of the value proposition?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it goes back to, my original thought of, we only are in business because of the people who are in need. So, if there are no people in need, there is no business, there is no product, there is no service, right? So how can we turn that into a value proposition? Well, you can reach more people if you have more different types of people, right? Because they're coming with different perspectives, different experiences, different life stories. You can reach and serve more people. So I'm just thinking of this from, clients that I've worked with at professional services, right? Now, say that most professional services would only be able to service people in a financial industry, but if you have a more diverse, not just as far as experience, thoughts, cultural backgrounds, all of these other just different things, you're able to reach more people because they're able to understand different target audiences, right? They're able to understand different markets. It's difficult for a 90% male dominated business to suggest or impose what a female market might want. Oftentimes they still try to do it, but they don't do it successfully because there needs to be a balance of the dominant majority or the majority who understands this market. So Dominique, please jump in.
No, I just said I can't stop laughing because they do still try to do it.
They do that, but they don't do it successfully. So again, if whatever you're building, you want to make sure that you have the right people to build the people that you want to reach, because you're not just building for you or people who look like you or people who come from where you're coming from, but maybe people who have encountered the same problem that you might be facing, that you built a product or an app or business or services for. So, these people won't always come from the same background, but they'll always have faced the same problem, but you have to know how to reach those people. So
yeah, I think that's spot on. The other thing, I would question this to everybody. If you're working for a company right now, if your customers spent a day inside your offices as an employee, what would shock them? What would they be surprised at? Right? Because this is what I'm thinking about with this. Can we transform our cultural values into value propositions? You should, right? There should be alignment, and I see a lack of it in my experience with companies, which is there's an adage, a saying that says the cobbler's kids have no shoes. So for those of you, a cobbler is defined as somebody, a person who makes shoes, and the thing is saying the person whose job it is to make shoes, their children don't have any. What does that mean? How does that play out in companies? Which is the companies that give all this great service to their customers and treat their customers with utmost respect. Inside, they don't treat their employees well. It's like a diversity and inclusion company who outside helps people with diversity and inclusion, but inside they're so not inclusive, right? It's like, what? A leadership communication company who helps people communicate brilliantly, and internally they can't communicate. And so what I always like to see is the companies that actually are treating their customers and providing excellence in customer service to their external customers the exact same way they're doing it internally. Or sometimes companies treat their external customers better than their internal customers. And I'm always looking for equity and equanimity there, because it should feel like the customer would want to know that, oh, you guys are great. I love working with you. You're so nice. And then the employee is like, yeah, if you only knew what it's like here, right? There's this disconnect there. So I would say yes to that organizational values. It should be a value prop. There should be alignment. So if your customers came in, they wouldn't be so shocked. They'd
culture
be like,
should be lived out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said culture should be lived out. Absolutely.
And I think that's it. That's the segue into the next question that Felipe asked, which is how to communicate that. It's not about how you communicate it with words and you say, we do this and we do that. It's about what you do every single day. It's about how your people show up for each other, how they show up for your customers, how they show up for themselves. And that's how you communicate it. And Michael mentioned earlier, walking around a company and listening to what's going on in the offices, you can understand so much of the culture. And I think for a customer, it's kind of the same thing. Whenever they have access, a little glimpse into how your company functions, you want them to see the good stuff. You want them to see those values being lived out, not in a forced way, as we talked about before, but you really want them to see, oh, this is what the company is really about. And I think for myself as a consumer, I tend to buy clothes that are ethically made, sustainable, etc. But I always do so much research behind it, because there are so many companies that say that they're selling, these sustainably made clothes and da 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 da. And then who makes them? Like women in a sweatshop. Sorry, that's not living out your values. So I think in terms of how you communicate your values, it's really it's how you live your values. You don't even need to make a crazy effort to communicate them. They should transpire through everything you do as a company.
Yeah, you're speaking to the behaviors, right? The behaviors should match that, and then we say, and it's interesting looking into cultures to say, is this? I don't know what the culture is like. Is it really this way? So for those of you who might be looking into the United States these days, for those of you who are not in the United States these days, be thankful that you're not. Sorry, no, just kidding. But if you want to look into the United States these days, I'll tell you, TeLisa, please speak to this, Dominique, as well. But if you want to see what's going on, you're seeing the picture. You're seeing the picture in the news, whatever news outlet you're watching. It's bumpy, it's turbulent, it's split, and that's the real. There's no fakeness of it, and that might be surprising to you for some of you if you've seen the U.S. in the past and be like, "Oh my God, what's happening?" Guess what? We're shocked too at some level, and other times we're like, "Nope, it's been like this. It's just coming up now." But there's an insight into a culture, and then how do we get through that? That's an interesting question, and we'll take a look at it. But TeLisa, I welcome your thoughts on what if they're seeing the accurate culture from what the media might be portraying.
I'm indifferent because media is not the most accurate portrayal of what is going on right now. I think social media might be a more accurate lens than, our typical and traditional media, such as news outlets, because we're able to, share our voices in an authentic space, our frustration in a space that we can be authentic or protected or at least hidden. And it makes me think about the question that we just received, a lot of employers have found it difficult to have, conversations about things that they might not like in a culture, right? It goes back to that whole listening aspect. Like, are we listening or are we just talking at someone? Are we just forcing or are we hearing and building together? So having those difficult conversations or uncomfortable conversations with an employer about your work environment, about how they treat customers, about how they treat employees, I think is really important to have that open, honest dialogue of communication, not monologue, dialogue of communication constantly going. And it's unfortunate that like a lot of organizations pre-pandemic would put out like an anonymous box where you can report shady dealings that's happening in the organization. And I think it would be more beneficial if there was just an anonymous space where you can share things that you don't like or things that you would like to change, or in a non-judgmental, non-reprimanded kind of way that you shared something. So now you feel or fear that you might lose your job. And I think that's a lot of times how toxic cultures become toxic cultures, because people are too afraid to speak up when it might be leadership against other leadership who don't treat each other fairly. And then that trickles down to the people who work under that leadership person who might be being bullied. So it goes back to nobody speaking because no one wants to offend or be fired if worse. So I think having a space of, you have to graciously receive compliments and feedback so that you can grow. And if you don't, it's like if you're going for a coach, a traditional coach, as far as you're trying to join the Olympics, you want to run a marathon, you want to do some karate, whatever it is, if you have a coach, you have to openly and honestly receive the feedback that you need in order to get the progress that you want. So when organizations want you to come in and coach them, or when they want employees to be honest with them, just know you're not going to get these abs if you're not going to be honest about what the things that are making you feel stuck and giving you, you don't share your poor habits, such as you eat at night, you stress eat, you're not going to get those abs, and everyone's going to see that you're not really putting effort in it, right? So allow your employees and create a space that you have enough space to hold truth in, that they can speak truthfully with you, honestly with you. And when you have trust there, it's easier for you to receive truth that might be disheartening to you. It's easy for you to have that there when there's a trust there, when there's relationship there. So when you're building your organization, when you're building your teams, if you don't have trust and truth, you're not going to ever be able to share those difficult or transparent moments that really need to change. So I think that's important. So Michael or Dominique, thoughts?
I just wish I had a mic to drop right now. I'm. I think you covered it. I can't right now. I can't think of anything to add. I think kudos to you. That was a perfect answer.
Yeah, totally. I think that I'm in agreement with Dominique, and then I think one of the things to look at too is, as you mentioned, is that there's been a lot of work done around this idea. I think it originally came out of Google's Aristotle study of like psychological safety, right? Where if I'm going to feel psychologically safe, I can share. So I would look back also to say, if we have employees who are afraid of open dialogue, or employers who are afraid of are giving people open dialogue, let's say, what are they afraid of, right? Are they afraid of what's going to be heard, what's going to be said? From the employee's perspective, exactly what TeLisa said is, I'm afraid of the repercussions, right? I speak up and then I get let go, or I get excluded, and then there's toxicity going back and forth. And so I would be really clear to say, we want to hear what you guys don't like, what you enjoy. We just want to hear. We're gathering data. We're not promising that we're going to act on anything right now. We're just going to gather data, but we can ensure that this is a safe environment and there's going to be no consequences. Then their actions have to match that statement. And that's really hard, right? People get offended. They say, oh, you're not a team player. And so I think the other thing is, if I'm an employee and I speak up, if I'm going to take the risk to speak up in an organization, I'm really hopeful that something gets done. And if it doesn't get done, right, because I spoke up, then there's a story I'm going to start telling myself about the organization, right? So it's a fine line. I think setting expectations of what we're doing, we are hearing. So we see this in Culture Amp surveys, questions, about what do we think, what's good, what's not, what are some challenges. You mentioned the boxes, which can be good and bad. But I think the bottom line is, if people are afraid to speak up, or if employers are afraid to ask, that's where we need to start our kind of discovery process. What's going on there? Okay, fair enough. But let's look at. TeLisa, go ahead.
I think I'll add to that a little bit by making an analogy. If you think of a personal relationship in your life, if you have that sense of not being able to speak to someone for fear of being shouted at, being beaten up, whatever it is, you have two choices. You stay and are miserable in a soul-crushing relationship, or you leave and create a new life for yourself. And it's the exact same thing, I think, in terms of cultures in a company. And for a lot of people, they will want to, a lot of people will want to just get away. And some people will try to fix the relationship. And it goes back to what you just said, Michael. Are the leaders prepared to listen and help fix or not? As simple. It's a choice.
I disagree. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. Like, it goes back to that original saying that people don't leave businesses, they leave the employers. And 100%. It's forever true. We don't break up with the business. Like, we might actually love what we do, but if we don't like who we do it for, or we don't like how we have to do it, then it becomes a disconnect, and there becomes a lack of joy and enthusiasm and integrity when we do our work. And if we can't do our work with integrity, with the opportunity to grow, with the opportunity to feel safe, with, like, why are we there? Like, and especially during a pandemic, you would, as an employee or as an entrepreneur, when you're facing these difficult times, we always have to think about our whys, right? Like, why are we here? Why are we doing this? What purpose are we solving? But again, when we're in this space of, we have so little threshold or space to want things that we don't want in our lives at this very moment. So we don't want to work for an employer that's going to make us feel less than or not appreciated or not smart or whatever the case may be. So I think that's important for us to remember as leaders, entrepreneurs, business builders, dreamers, all of these things in an organization. We have to remember that.
Yeah. Plus on that one. So Javier says, what can be the best system to take care of the organizational culture? So we talked about cultivating it, creating space. Once we have it, what are some thoughts on how we can take care of it? That's a great question. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, how you attain something is how you sustain it, right? So if you were going to the gym, I'm gonna use this just again because I mean that's literally what I do in DEI Dojo as a consultancy. It's literally modeled after fitness, like how equitably fit do you want to be? How inclusively fit do you want to be? How diversity fit do you want to be? Again, how you first got those abs, if you were turning down plates, if you were not eating after 7, if you were drinking water. I think it's really important to maintain those habits that helps you to develop that muscle. So if you started to integrate mindfulness in your community, you have to continue to do the mindfulness. If it's daily check-ins and stand-ups, you have to continue the daily checkups and the stand-ups. If it's the magic hour, you have to continue maintaining or something similar because you don't want to keep the same things. The point is not always having the same thing, but being flexible and having the structure in place for it. So
awesome. Yeah, I'm on that. I agree with that one. I also would say this is what I'm seeing, especially with Corona, which is in order to take care of a culture, take care of your body, as TeLisa was mentioning, I like to kind of see when you put that body or you put that culture, you put that system under stress, it's natural for cracks to appear. So any system that goes under stress, yourself working too much, you'll start to see cracks appear in relationships. And that's actually a normal process. It's actually an interesting process to kind of put a system under stress and see where the cracks appear. And then if I want to take care of those cracks, the ones that need your attention, right? That's something to take a look at in terms of to continue to take care of an organizational culture. Where are the cracks forming? And where do we need to support people more to make sure that they don't break, right? And I think Corona is creating major cracks in organizations, right? Interpersonally and groups and professionally. And so where does an organization and a leader in particular start to recognize and don't deny the cracks, right? And then add support to them where it makes sense and call them out and go, hey, we're cracking here. That's okay, right? We're under stress. Let's support it a little bit. And whatever way it is, looking back at what got you there, what TeLisa mentioned, which is exactly correct in my mind, or what Dominique says, giving people space to coach. But don't be afraid of the cracks. High-performing teams, high-performing organizations put themselves under stress again and again. Because if you're going to continue to perform even more, you're going to have to go through some stressful situations, right? Championships are won when there's tough games and tough situations, but you have to be aware of those cracks, right? And then where leaders fault sometimes is they ignore them, they deny them, they don't put any effort into them, they call people weak for having them, right? All things that I find will just create major cracks. If you ignore something long enough, it'll come back. It'll show up in your life, whatever you've put away. It just happens again and again.
what's that quote? Watch for the cracks. A small crack can sink a big ship. Like, so that's yeah, agreed.
That's a good one. Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I think a good way to take care and maintain the organizational culture is to create a culture of feedback. And what I mean by that is often in companies we see, employees will receive feedback twice a month, twice a year, when they're doing, if that, and that's really stressful. That's really stressful for the employee. That's really stressful for the person giving the feedback. There's actually studies that show how stressful it is for someone to give feedback. And so there's been a great case study by the Neuro Leadership Institute, and I think it was with IBM or I think they did that with 2 or 3 companies, and they basically looked at how some companies have created what they called cultures of feedback. And the difference there is that they are pushing employees to ask for feedback. And so when the feedback is being asked for, it's a lot less stressful. And it means that there's a culture of growth. There's a culture where people want to do better, where people are trying to constantly perform at their best. And in that way, leaders, managers are able to give feedback in a much less stressful way as well, because they're actually responding to a need from the company. So I think taking care of the culture is also creating a culture of feedback where you're training your people to ask how they can perform better. A quick example of that might be, someone might have done a presentation, encourage them to go to someone else who was in that room or on that call and say, hey, I thought I did okay with that, but what did you think? And I love that Felipe says feedback also for leaders. Absolutely. How do you create a culture where feedback comes through all different layers of the company? TeLisa, you want to say something? I could keep going forever on this.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I certainly agree. I think it's really important that we receive feedback, because mentorship doesn't just happen at the senior leadership level to the entry level, right? We should always be receiving feedback, growth with every area or person of connection that these threads again. We should always be listening, evolving, sharing, pouring into each other. And I believe that can happen at multiple levels. It doesn't just need to be someone who is super senior of us or we always pouring into them. I think that we should receive feedback at every level. So that's literally all I wanted to say. You said everything I wanted to say.
Yeah, I double click on both of you on what you guys said and agree. And I think what you're referring to, Dominique, in the Neurostrip Leadership Institute, as well as lots of other studies done, which is high performing teams, high performing cultures, they seek feedback, they ask for feedback instead of waiting for it to be delivered those times. And we all know, like, when you get critical feedback, and this is the other thing I think the companies make this mistake, which is they don't separate out reward, recognition, and feedback, right? So reward is good job, you get a bonus. We're getting free coffee, free pizza. It's great. It makes you go like, yay. It's like a dog with a treat a little bit. Yay, Pavlovian, boom, bell rings, give me the treat. Okay. Recognition is hard, it doesn't get done enough, but yet it's easy to do when it's done well. And it's not like, hey, Dominique, good job on that, or hey, TeLisa, well done. It's like it's the leader or the peer who really recognized what you did and said, hey, I noticed you were taking a long time with that customer. They were really difficult. I appreciated how patient you were and I value you being on that team. That's recognition. They took 10 seconds more, but you feel it in your heart. Like this person was watching. They were observing me, right? And feedback is that bit where it's just like, what can you do better? What can you adjust? And it should be constructive, but we all know that when we get it, it hurts. Even if I trust you, it hurts, right? So if I'm able to seek it and be prepared for it, I'm more open to hearing it, right? But you're right. There's companies, so many companies that I work with, and I'm sure you both do, that just don't have a culture of that, right? And it changes in different countries. Feedback I got in Japan was different than the feedback I got in Germany, in Colombia, in France, right? It's very different. It's different for generations. But if you can establish that, hey, we want you to get better. We genuinely care about your success, and that's why we're giving you this feedback to improve. There's a greater chance, but I'm 100% behind that. You have to establish it, and it's really hard. It's really hard. But when you make it like, when we show it as a benefit to people, and people learn how to deliver it well, it's great. I really like it, but it's hard. All right, so Sophia, you have a couple of questions for us, and I like them. Let's see which one we should unpack. Okay. The one before that, maybe. All right. The tendency to circular unlevel organization will help. Oh, okay. No, it's fine. I think I get an idea of what Sophia is saying. Yeah, go ahead, TeLisa. Like when we're creating this company's chart, if it's not so hierarchical, if people can have cross-functional communications and cross-level communications, is that important when you're looking to create these open cultures and cultures of feedback? TeLisa, Dominique, what do you think?
I think, you know, even when we think of hierarchical, that is, I don't want to say, well, when we think of hierarchical, that is a construct, right? Like it's the idea that we sit above and not equal to or not proximity with. I think that that is a problem. I think, you know, CEO, if you have an organizational chart where CEO sits at the top and then everything trickles down, that's kind of where people also will start to operate. Right? They will even operate just off of something that they see in their head of a hierarchical structure of I should only operate at this level because I'm only here. And if they see themselves in proximity to or in connection with a CEO or CTO or whoever, leadership or management, it becomes a shared responsibility, a shared opportunity where everyone feels that they're adding value. They might not be adding value in the same way or at the same capacity, but they all are adding value. And I think the circular ideal of like, you know, our organizational chart, I think that's just another way that we say, hey, we're all here and this is how we all work together, because it's data science. The way that we display certain things is how we can see where we are. So if we're all just blops on a chart, then we all feel like we're just blops in life. But if you grid that better and make a circle or make a bar, that matters as well. So I think it's just something that we see that we can say, oh, that's where I am. It's a map. It's an indicator. If you're lost in the mall, you know you're at the entry versus the exit versus the food court. I think it's just another way we know where we are. But I think when we do it as a circle, just going back to like medieval times, didn't they do the circle table because they didn't want a knight to feel more powerful or above each other, right? So like that's a way that you would join in a circle.
Yeah.
We're all equal.
It's like they wanted people to feel equal. They also were
Right.
They also didn't want to get stabbed in the back.
Right, that too.
So they could see everybody in the front.
Historical.
I love that, TeLisa. And I want to add something here. There are 5 main social threats that people that are truly stressful for people and that leaders should look out for. And to the point of the hierarchy, one of them is status. And so understanding that you are, you know, the title of this panel is People First, right? Is that you are a person. You're not a rank or a layer on an organizational chart. You are a person. And I think if that can be communicated in the same way that we talked about values being communicated, that is through action, through what people do and how people act in a company, then that helps also with this idea of hierarchy. The other 4 threats, I'll mention them because I think they're important. And the next one is certainty. One is autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And so again, I want to bring this idea of relatedness in, because how do people relate to each other? And is it from a lens of I am above you because I am above you on this chart, or is it we're people and we're working together?
Yeah, that's nice. So you're referencing David Rock's work in the SCARF model, right? Which
yeah,
is
the
great.
SCARF.
Just
Yeah,
really good.
yeah.
We'll put some links in there for people because I think that's a great book and good stuff to take a look at. The one thing I would just add to it, which is just across cultures, national cultures in particular, hierarchy plays differently, right? Not disagreeing with TeLisa or Dominique that it can be detrimental to organizations, but also want to recognize that in places like Colombia, in Brazil también, in Japan, hierarchy is really important, and you're not going to break that out of the culture, right? But I would say that what Sophia is asking in terms of that circular model that TeLisa mentioned, which I'm in agreement with, is can you give people more visibility and more accessibility within the hierarchical frame, right? Because in some of those cultures, it's like the VP is going to be there, that's the director's office, but can we give them some more visibility, some more experience with, so it feels more like an open door? I was always interested in Japan and traditional Japanese companies, which is everything from the police station to the electric company to the corporate companies. Nobody wanted the corner office. The corner office with windows was basically meant you were excluded and you were actually on the way out. You were not part of the group, because all the other desks in the office were set up this way, like There's mostly square metal desks, and they literally were right next to each other. And the 6th level employee was in front of the 5th level employees. Right next to them was the 4th and the 3rd, 2nd and the 1st, and the boss was in front of all of them. But every day their desks were next to them, and then his boss or their boss was behind them, but they would all be visible. And whoever got the corner office was soon to be retired. Right? So very differently culturally, where in the United States, people were like, corner office, door to close, glass windows, yay, I made it. In Japan meant you did make it. So hierarchy can be looked at so many different ways, from visibilities to door closing, and understanding that within a company culture. But for those of you out there that are in cultures that are more hierarchical, in Latin America, let's say, and you're building your own company, or you're doing a startup, or want to find something, you have the opportunity to create your own version of that. That's the true and version of you. And if it's more circular, that's great. But give people that accessibility, that visibility, because that's what's missing. And that's what TeLisa was saying, which kind of causes people to disconnect, because I feel less than you, right? And I can't go to you and talk. So those would be a couple of things I'd add. Yes, in Colombia, everyone is called doctor. Sí, doctor. I was so happy living in Colombia. My dad was like, I'm a doctor. This is great. Soy doctor y no hice nada. I'm a doctor and I never went to school. Pero don Michael, ¿qué tú quieres? You know, like, it was all very interesting. Yeah. Don y doña.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's nice. Doctor, right?
I'll call you doctor if you like.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I don't want that PhD. Thank you. All right. What else? What else should we chat about? This has been an awesome conversation. I've been enjoying connecting with both of you. Now, there's the scarf model. Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah,
good stuff.
that's so good. Go. Good to share.
I love
good
that.
Share.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
I'm gonna bring in. Should we bring in our hostess with the mostess?
Sí.
Yeah.
Rosario. Rosario, come join us. Dalia, what's up?
Doctora Rosario.
Doctora Casas, del backstage, at front stage, come and chat with us. Oh no.
Yes.
Ah, there she is.
Yay. Well, this conversation is going great. I saw how the participants are very engaged. Of course, you are touching very like foundational aspects when you are an entrepreneur, when you are building a company, where you are building a product. Well, you need to understand that people is not an instrument. It's your main goal. You are building with people, for people, and basically, thank you for sharing everything. I'm a big fan of each of you. And now that you already talked, I will just, I want to ask you something because well, I want to let the audience know that when I met Michael, with another Rosario, with Rosario Londoño, we built something together. And when I met Dominique and TeLisa, we met at a network of women that are basically doers, building or dreaming a better world and doing the task to really accomplish it. And basically, I want to ask you if you should give just one advice for these entrepreneurs who are building companies in both places, Latin America and mainly the three-state area. These are the participants of our cohort. And you are in two different geographies, two different cultural environments, but at the same time, you are only in one planet. What could be the advice on how to prepare yourself to be the leader that the world needs to create at the same time the company that the environment needs, the people surrounding you, the communities? I mean, money, of course, well, we need to produce money. Otherwise, we are not able to build the dreams. But how to start and how to really concentrate on being a complete leader based on everything you were saying, and I know.
Yeah. So I'll chime in really quickly with this, with my final thought. I believe that when we don't build businesses with our heart, that's when we build businesses that that don't successfully meet the needs of our society, right? So it always starts from us wanting to solve a problem, to create a solution. And if we're not building those things with our heart, then like, what does our world look like? Like, what kinds of things that won't exist? What kind of businesses? What kinds of products? What kinds of services? What kind of things won't exist if we're not building things with our mind and our heart and with the right people, and also giving other people the ability to participate in that solution, to create that solution with you, to co-create that solution with you. I think it's necessary, it's important. And when every time that we turn down hands that want to help us in our organization, like genuinely want to help us be a part of the solution, be a part of a vision, a mission, and a purpose, and something greater than them. And every time we say no to that, we say no to living in a world and in a future that we all can feel proud of and be a part of. So that's what I would want to leave with you all this evening, as well as to think about the teams. Every time when you tell someone no because you don't believe that they will add to your culture, and you're looking at how they will fit in your culture, you're saying no to what our future could look like and what kinds of businesses and products won't be there.
Awesome. So good. I'll just say two things. I'll say two things, Rosario. One to the leader and one to the business. From a leadership perspective, I just like to follow and try to grow with one rule, right? And most people will talk about it as the golden rule, la regla de oro, no? Right? The golden rule, which is la regla, which is treat people the way you want to be treated, right? Trata a los demás en la manera en que vos quieres ser tratado, right? Treat people the way you'd like to be treated. And I'd say switch that rule, make it the platinum rule, la regla latino, algo así, platinum rule. And all it is changing one word, but strive to treat people in the way they want to be treated, right? Strive to treat people in the way they want to be treated. And I'll tell you right now, in my personal experience, you guys might think differently, there's no way you're going to treat everybody the way they want to be treated. It's probably impossible. So acknowledge that, but you can do at least one thing. You can ask. And if you strive to ask people, how do you like to be treated? What are your preferences? Goes back to the culture of listening that Dominique and TeLisa mentioned. As a leader, if you do that, that's huge. You're asking, because when you can treat people the way they want to be treated, you're going to have a lot of connections. But if you assume people want to be treated the way you want to be treated all the time, we're too diverse, too many preferences. But you can ask. So as a leader, if you just do that, I see great success for you. Really simple to do. Second thing, as a company, as you're a founder, entrepreneur, trying to make this work, okay? You talk to TeLisa, you talk to Dominique, you talk to Rosario, you talk to myself, there's gonna be obstacles. Oh my goodness, there's gonna be obstacles. So many obstacles, okay? So many obstacles. If you have the ability to see an obstacle as a benefit to you, wow. If you have the ability to every obstacle, every hard thing that comes at you, go, okay, wait a minute, this sucks. This isn't good. Oh no, I lost funding. How can this benefit me? If you have the ability to transition that even 50% of the time, you'll succeed. You will succeed, right? You might have to change your product, change this, change that, but belief is what's important, and how you see obstacles will help you in your personal life and professionally, right? So those are my two.
Dominique.
Amazing, because really what I was going to say is building on both of yours. So I love hearing this. A lot of my work is working with individuals, and no matter where they are in a company, whether they're a founder, whether they're a CEO, whether they're a solopreneur, or someone who wants to change their career, everybody faces self-doubt. Everybody faces, what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I the right person to do this? Am I good enough to, et cetera, et cetera. And so the advice that I want to give is step into that identity, step into the person that you know you need to be in order to build that company, in order to be that leader, in order to have impact, in order to, as TeLisa said, change the world. And the key to that is do the work on yourself. It's not about what's going on around. TeLisa mentioned earlier, you want the abs, you do the work, right? You don't sit watching TV eating chips. Like, that's not how it's going to work. You want your company to be amazing, step into the identity, do the work, and first, before anything, do the work on yourself. Become that person, become that leader, understand what it means to you, how you show up. Take the advice, take the help. Don't feel that you have to do everything by yourself, because that's what leaders do. So what is it that you need to do in order to step into that identity? That's mine.
That's perfect. I was just saying that's perfect. Step into that identity. Love that.
Oh, thank you. I really want to thank you. Before closing, one invitation you want to make to everybody. Something you want to invite them to join you, to meet you.
Oh, and please, and I enjoy you. I invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn to further this conversation, because I often have discussions around belonging and building inclusive spaces, and we do that by threading these connections together with each other. So I invite you to join me in creating a more diverse, inclusive ecosystem and network on my LinkedIn. I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I do the exact same thing. I'd say once I spend time with people, they become part of my network. If they want to or not, it's their choice, right? But I'm here, and like TeLisa mentioned, join me on LinkedIn. And I'm not the kind of LinkedIn person who's like, yeah, join me on LinkedIn, and then
Right.
You say, hey, Michael, I'm like, sorry. I actually make time for people. I will chat with you. I will schedule a Zoom call with you if you feel that it'll be valid. So happy to be that. And then within what we're doing here in Brooklyn, to Bogota, open to helping everybody out and supporting as necessary and needed.
I'm gonna echo all of it. Same thing. Do contact me on LinkedIn. Let's connect. Let's talk. Also, I'm sure Rosario has shared with her a link. You can book a half hour with me.
Awesome.
If you are a participant in the incubator. So go ahead and do it. It's there. It's free. I just want to help you. Let's build it. Let's build the world that we want to see, right? We're the change.
No, I forgot one more thing. If anyone wants to build inclusive products, I'm happy to also chat about that. So ask me anything about inclusivity, and as far as product design, making it accessibility. I think that's also another way that we share with our customers or clients or users that they belong.
Well, I want to thank you. I know our participants know how generous are these proposals, for sure, and these offers. For the ones joining the incubator, for mentors and participants and entrepreneurs, you all are connected also through the private network. Then you can also start conversations, asking questions. Well, this is just the starting point of it. Then I want to close saying thank you again. You each know how valuable it is to have you here. You are some of the very few mentors who are not Latinos by heritage, but for sure you were some of the few that were committed with this since we had the idea. Then thank you very much. For us, the creation of a bridge between Brooklyn and Bogota, just as a sign of the Americas, the complete continent. The entrepreneurs who are at the level of the sea, but also in Bogota, 2,700 above the sea level. Is a symbol that we want to use to create this community. And thank you again. Have a good night. And for all the people following us, see you tomorrow. Tomorrow we have another panel about people, leadership, and teams. And Thursday we have one about building product. and selling products. Thank you again. Have a good night and see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye. Adios, doctores.
Doctores.
Gracias.
Bye.
Sí.